Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Rocket Summer, a BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan, designed to throw a spotlight on classic science fiction for the month of July, uh, starting at the very earliest days of the genre with Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and then moving forward in a stately progression, 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, ending with the year 1970, which is where the event draws to a close. We're not crossing the border into new wave science fiction. We're staying at 1970. And I'm one of the co-hosts of Rocket Summer, but I've been a bad co-host. Not only have I been ignoring that progression and just reading all over the map for the whole of the month instead of reading in a progression of decades, but I've also neglected Rocket Summer for the last 5 days. I haven't made any videos, even though Rocket Summer is confined to the month of July. I only have a limited number of days left to make Rocket Summer videos and use my epic Rocket Summer thumbnail. uh, I have been reading the books. I just haven't been making long, sententious videos about them. So I'm amazed that my co-hosts have now jettisoned me. But I added a book to my reading pile last night, propelled not only by guilt about not doing Rocket Summer, but also out of obligation, happy obligation, because a viewer of this channel sent me a box of books yesterday. And one of the books in that box was something that's a bullseye for a Rocket Summer. Of a foundational work of science fiction. Somebody sent me this, Jules Verne's Master of the World. In this old Airmont mass market paperback. And this is a novel from 1904, so right at the beginning of anything that we would actually consider to be science fiction. Science fiction being speculation, science fiction being technology, science fiction being also the idea of reproducibility, the idea of the advantages that technology gives to its wielders and the disadvantages that people have in its path. All of those things are fundamental aspects of science fiction and are the reasons I tend to discount Frankenstein as a precursor to the genre. I know that it's neither here nor there. I know there are plenty of people who disagree with me about that, but until Dr. Frankenstein reprises his experiment in the movies, there's no thought that any science is taking place in Frankenstein that can ever be reproduced by anyone. That seems to me to make it more fantasy, more magic than science fiction. But either way, Jules Verne certainly would get the crown for one of the earliest science fiction authors. Certainly he's my favorite from the very earliest days, the turn of the 20th century, which is kind of amazing that I didn't spend the first week rereading him. I could have done that. I could have done 7 videos on Jules Verne, but no, I didn't. Instead, it took me all this time, all the way to the end of Rocket Summer, to read Jules Verne, to reread an English-language translation of Master of the World. In this old Airmont paperback, which I'm pretty sure is the exact same thing, same illustration of the author at the beginning here, same translation, as the Magnum Easy Eye edition. I've also read the Magnum Easy Eye edition of this book. If I remember correctly, it's the exact same thing. I don't think in either case the translator is credited, but I'm pretty sure that Magnum Easy Eye probably just bought this reprint line and reprinted it themselves with different cover art. And I've read one other English translation of this work somewhere. Can't quite remember where it was. It had a lot more get up and go than this translation did. So maybe it was Penguin, or has Oxford done this? I don't really know. Or it could have been in one of those big omnibus volumes of Jules Verne, if those aren't all this. I don't know one way or another. I know that I've read a better translation of this, and I've never read Master of the World in French. And I've also never read in French the precursor to this book, which is kind of weird. You get a Jules Verne omnibus edition, you'll get all his famous books, and you'll almost always get this book, and you will never get the book, the prequel to this book. This book is a sequel. It took me no time at all to read. It's 80 pages long, but the reason for that is because it's a sequel to an earlier book that never gets translated into English, that no one ever talks about, that no one's never in any Jules Verne anthology. It's called Robur the Conqueror. And Robur the Conqueror is one of the main characters in this book as well. I don't know why that is. I mean, I could swear that I remember reading Robur the Conqueror, and I don't think I read it in French. It was execrable. But the thing that doesn't really tell me anything, because the thing that a lot of people don't like to say about Jules Verne is that he also is execrable in French. He writes he's Michael Crichton. He writes just awful, awful prose. But he has lots of great ideas. lots of bad ideas too. He just throws them all at the whiteboard and sees which one will stick. And here, Rober is back. Nobody missed him. Nobody wanted him back, but he's back, and he has developed a vehicle, and he's buried in Lake Erie. So Jules Verne had absolutely no knowledge of America, no knowledge of the Great Lakes. Boy, oh boy, can you tell that in this book. But Rober has gone to ground, so to speak, in the Great Lakes with this vehicle. An artist attempt is made on it there. You can see it looks like sort of a plane, but also wheels on it. It's an omni craft. It can travel incredibly fast, 150 miles an hour. And it can do so with equal ease in the air, on land, or in the water, or under the water. So it represents this bizarre piece of technology. In 1904, 1903, nothing like this existed in the world. In 1903 and 1904, only a few people even dreamt of this. The thing is actually solid. It's made, I think, of a kind of protoplastic, which means that it's taking to the air, but it's not a dirigible. It's not a helium-powered airship like the Hindenburg. Instead, it's heavy. It weighs several hundred or several thousand tons or several thousand pounds, and yet it can fly through propulsion of its own. That must have struck original readers of this book as absolutely bizarre. It's an echo. It's a dim echo of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, also we have an extremely individual Ubermensch wannabe, like Rober, who largely has his power and his sway over the world, even to the point of the satirical Master of the World title, because of a vessel, because of a weird vessel. Take him out of the vessel, he's just an ordinary person. Doesn't have anything in the way of armies, armadas, anything like that. It's just this weird, menacing vessel. Nothing on Earth can catch Rober's vessel. Nothing can find it. It can go anywhere. But he's no Captain Nemo. He's boring. And so is everybody else in this book. Because the program here is the same. It's predictable, which is that a group of enterprising people, a group of enterprising men with pluck and men's club speaking attitudes, vows to bring Rober to heel. They vow to bring him to heel, to find him. And of course, they end up being found by him. He's has a masterful brow, we're told over and over again. A masterful brow, commanding eyes, but there's no sense of personal connection here at all. There's no sense of personal interaction at all. And you know already what's going to happen. Jules Verne and H.G. Wells share the same Deus Ex Machina. They, in their science fiction stories, when they produce something that is unbeatable, something that seems to tower over the standard weapons or arsenal of ordinary people, that thing will be taken down by a Deus Ex Machina. It won't just go on to its destiny, it will fail. In War of the Worlds, famously, that is the Martians don't have any inbred invulnerabilities to Earth's biosphere, so they get sick and die. And here, the same thing. The Rober's vessel is struck down by the gods, basically, is challenged by the weather and falls apart. But we get an adventure story. Until then, it is to call this story undercooked would be an insult to tofu everywhere. It's just not there at all. It's just not there at all. And it's in Jules Verne anthologies, but if this is this bad, then I want, in a way, a perverse kind of way, I want to read Rober the Conqueror. I want to read the book to which this is a sequel. Because it's weird to me that in Jules Verne anthologies and whatnot, compendiums of one kind or another, this gets reprinted, but never the book to which it is a sequel. I might read Rober the Conqueror for Garb August. I have a good, strong feeling that will apply. But this, not only is it thin and bad, no characters, very predictable, No research on Jules Verne's part. I mean, he might not have known anything about American geography or the American Great Lakes, but he could have walked to the library. He could have done that, and he didn't bother. Not only that, but also this thing suffers from a quality of Rocket Summer that I have noticed. I've talked about it a couple of times in the videos that I used to make before I gave up on the event, that I think is fascinating on its own, which is the datedness of a lot of this stuff. And the way it dates is a lot different from a lot of the ways that a lot of other fiction dates. Because other fiction dates according to the plasticity of social norms, which are not carved in stone. They're not part of physical reality. They're the way that we behave. So if you read a 150-year-old novel, you're probably going to wince at, for instance, its racial characterizations, its racial sensitivity. You're definitely going to wince at its sexual sensitivity. The way that women are characterized in that book, you'll wince when you see that. Maybe environmental sensitivity. The champion logger, the person who's clearing out the most forest, will be cheered on throughout the book, and you'll be expected to cheer on with them in the narrative. The sensitivity to those issues has changed radically, but that's flexible. That's a societal thing. It can, as we've seen tremors of in the modern day, change back. It can change back. So encountering those things, that kind of datedness, it's weird, but it doesn't feel the same as a datedness that is based on fact. Immutable, inarguable fact. That feels different. To me, anyway, it does. I'd love to have you all over for wine and calzones on Friday night to talk about it yourselves. To me, that feels different. To me, having a novel that's 100 years old where there are no women in the workplace, where the woman is basically the highest paid servant in the household of the man, that she's expected to have dinner on the table, she knows the children's names and their birthdays, the father doesn't know those things, she's expected to take care of them, make sure they're okay, make sure they go to school, make sure the house is neat and tidy. You read a 70-year-old book like that, where the female character is treated that way. Of course, in the smartest books from then, those stereotypes are already being exploded. But if you read the non-smart books from them and you see that, you think, okay, well, I'm glad we don't think that anymore, except that Project 2025, the modern American Republican Party, does think that way and thinks that's good. They want to return to that. So you can see it's flexible. It might be that we've had our sensitivities raised now, but there are plenty of people who are intent on lowering those sensitivities again. That's a very different thing from reading a book from 70 years ago that has a character traipsing around in the jungles of Venus, because they view Venus as a slightly hotter and more humid Florida. We know that's not true. That's not a thing that's ever going to change back. Mars, the surface of Mars, is never going to change back. We now know different. We know that Mars and Venus don't have any civilizations on them, that they don't have any liquid water on them. We know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. We have seen video footage of what the surface of those worlds look like. That seems to me to be a different kind of dating. One that, I don't know, in a way it's more interesting because it's less threatening. But in another way, it's more boring because the whole book can be premised on that. Rober's miracle machine here, his miracle vehicle, it's slow. It's slow compared to even our middling fast vehicles now. And also, Jules Verne clearly has all sorts of thoughts about what happens to the human body, or to, I guess, what he would prematurely have called time space, at 150 miles an hour. Now, that's not unbelievable. Even in the 1920s, people thought kinetic scientists actually said, as a matter of just a flat, confident declaration, that although the machines might one day be capable of traveling at 60 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour would kill a human being. That was just in the 20s that people said that. So just 15 years after this. So they're certainly saying that at this time. So it's no small wonder to me that Jules Verne gets stuff like that wrong, how humans could react to hyperacceleration, how fast a machine could go. You throw enough of that stuff at the whiteboard, some of it, most of it, will probably be wrong. He was right that the future of air travel were crafts that were not light, so they floated, but rather that were made of heavy materials and just propelled through the air. He was right about that. And for all I know, I'm not an expert on this at all, but for all I know, he may have been one of the first people to be right about that. I mean, Edgar Rice Burroughs has flying metal airships on Barsoom, but he makes a point of saying that they have flotation bladders. They are essentially floating. They are lighter than they're being lifted up rather than being propelled forward. Maybe Verne was the first popular author to suggest that that might be the way, that it might be not only possible but preferable. I don't know, but that's only one thing in this book, and even that, I mean, how is a reader in 2025 supposed to feel even the slightest shiver of dramatic excitement at something at a craft that is viewed as world threatening because it can travel 10 miles an hour slower than the car you've got in the driveway? How are you supposed to have a shiver of excitement about that? There's no way that you can. I don't know. Master of the World was for me a failure. so I'm not kicking back into Rocket Summer on the best of terms, but I will try again. I will try again tonight. I will try not to let a Rocket Summer day go by until the month is over, so that my co-hosts don't egg my house. But I'll be back. Master of the World, though, not really. Try mastering your narrative first. Anyway, I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.